Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent podcast. Today, I'm with Jacqueline Richards-Shrestha. Jacqueline is a licensed professional counselor in Colorado and a self-love coach worldwide. She is passionate about helping young adults and millennial women who struggle with body dissatisfaction and relationship anxiety to build their confidence so they can have better relationships and live more fulfilling lives. Jacqueline has developed the 5 weeks to a better relationship with your body self-love coaching program to help women move beyond a mean and maybe even abusive relationship with themselves to one that's kind, loving, and healthy. Jacqueline, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm super excited for our combo today.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's start with the typical two, Jacqueline.
Yes.
So, first, how do you conceptualize codependency?
I think for me, when I think of codependency, I think it's when somebody will self-abandon for another person. So when they aren't listening to their own needs or wants, and just forgets themselves in honor or to take care of another person's needs or their emotional needs or their wants.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in your experience, is this typically conscious
Mm.
or unconscious?
I think there can be a lot of variation, but I do believe that it starts as unconscious patterning
Right.
that we develop early on. I've been really pondering on this as I've been preparing to come here, and I work a lot with attachment, and I really have pondered on how connected is an anxious attachment style to codependency. And knowing that our attachment patterning comes before the age of 2.5, 3, where it's all pre-verbal, kind of unconsciously, how are we relating to another person? So I think it starts, um, unconscious. And then later on in our lives, and maybe once we start to get into relationships, I think that if there can become more awareness when we start noticing patterns, like we're dating the same kind of people, or we're getting in relationships and the same things are happening, or we I
Right.
think that's when we start to become aware. And it's
Mhm.
oh, maybe I'm doing this. Oh, I'm ignoring red flags.
Right.
Oh, I'm not listening to myself, or not saying no when I really want to, because I
Right.
feel like I have to do something. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I remember feeling, I was like, oh, I feel the exact same dating this person as I did with the last person. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. What?
it's the
Wow.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So slowly building that consciousness.
Mhm.
And yet, yeah, these unconscious patterns. It's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've heard it. I mean, this podcast is almost 3, so I've heard
Mhm.
similar definitions, but I appreciate the reminder about attachment really being formed and developed, especially like between like 0 to 2.5. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, like what did my codependency look like when I was 2 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested in just exploring it with you too, because yeah, like if that's the case, if our attachment is formed then, like it really has to do with our connection to our primary caregiver and whether does our primary caregiver, do they have emotional needs that they don't know how to take care of? Are they attuned to our emotional needs, or are we having to like think about their needs all the time? And I know, like, I guess I can share about one of my experiences too that I was thinking about sharing of like,
Yeah, that's the next question. So
yeah,
go
oh,
ahead,
okay.
Jacqueline. Tell us about your
Yeah.
codependency.
Yeah, well, I was reflecting on it today, actually my own therapy session, where I have an amazing mom, and she also struggles with her own emotions, and she's never really been able to like emotionally regulate. And I'm aware of this now as a therapist, and like I recently spent a lot of time with her. I went back to like home to Minnesota for a couple of months, and so it was a really interesting, eye-opening experience. Also, I went back with like my daughter, who I have like an 18-month-old daughter now, but it was like the trippiest stuff. I don't know if I can swear on the podcast, but it was like the trippiest.
Yeah.
Okay, I swear a lot, so I might swear. So it's just like the trippiest shit to like watch my mom interact with my daughter, who is a baby, and then me witnessing, being like, oh my God, is that what she did with me? And like, you know, but so, it's like my mom just has big feelings, and she never had a place to like learn how to navigate her feelings or process her feelings or work with them. And so for me as a little one, and even now as an adult, I notice myself sometimes doing this. She has big feelings, and I'm almost like, all my attention like almost like physically goes out to her of like, what does she need to do to calm down? Like, what does she need so she feels better? Um, and so I think it's like, as a little one, it was like my mom maybe didn't have this space or ability to like totally attune to me. And it was in that yeah, I think it like impacted my attachment style of like, and it's part of me that would, you know, historically abandon myself and my own needs to take care of my mom's emotional needs.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'll just say I'm like a recovering codependent. Like I'm just like definitely on the edge. I'm in a beautiful relationship, and I've done a lot of work with it. And it's come from my, yeah, just like really good therapy and amazing, just like lots of love and lots of live or like listening, and the work and coming back to myself, and oftentimes
Mhm.
to my body. But I also want to make space if you have any thoughts about that, or, as we were talking about early attachment stuff, or
Well, yeah, I appreciate you sharing, and I think we talked about this with my family. We were just laughing about it, but how this is early, but it's not 2.5. It's not 3. I must have been like maybe 5 or 6. And I, for everyone who's heard this anecdote before, I'm just reminding you of it. But I remember how stressed my mom would be around the holidays.
uh-huh. Mhm.
And like she just like she did it all, right? Like we did the family photo, and she sent the card, and she baked 10,000 cookies and
Mhm.
tamales, and which is like, for those who don't know, like a very intense uh
Labor of
like
love.
Mexican dish,
Yeah.
yes, like to make, especially by yourself. Usually you do like a line of family members. And yeah, so she would do a lot, and yeah, I by the time I was like probably like 2.5, I sensed something, but then being a little older, I must have been, yeah, 5 or 6 years old. And on Christmas morning, I knew I had already known that my mom tended not to sleep on Christmas Eve. And my
Uh-huh.
dad didn't, I don't think he slept that much either because they were both up wrapping presents all night. And, you know, he was the elf to her Santa. But I have a twin sister, and we'd wake up, and she was understandably so excited to go to the living room and start opening presents in the morning. We open
Mhm.
presents traditionally in the morning. And I would be in bed. We shared a room, and I was like, Sonia, no. I would beg her to wait with me in our bed a while longer so
Mm.
that mom could rest a little longer. Then,
Uh,
yeah, like, then, you know, had we just both been like very excited and like ran to the living room. But I was like, mom needs more rest.
yeah.
She's so stressed and she's done so much. Like, please, please, Sonia. And my, you know, understandably, my 5, 6 year old twin sister was just giddy and all excited. And so, yeah, we laughed about that and like, you know, oh, Marissa, like you're so empathetic and sensitive and like, you know, like observant. And
Mhm.
also, yeah, I'm sure that's like a really early memory. And yeah, I can't really go back earlier than that, but obviously like the seeds had been planted when I was 1, 2, 3 years old. And that's
Yeah.
just how it manifested, maybe around 5 or 6.
Yeah, totally. And that conscious awareness of like, oh, I need to take care of my mom by like giving her a break, even though there's probably a part of you that was so excited to go get those presents and be out there, but really that had to go to like maybe to the back burner for like the part of you that was like, oh, I need to take care of mom. She's tired.
Right.
Like, you, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I think part of me knew like if she's tired, if she gets more rest, like the
Mhm.
day will go smoother as opposed to her being sleep deprived and, you know, cranky and like
Yeah,
what that had turned into maybe other years. So,
totally. Wow. And little young you was so wise and like, and also I'm like, oh, also like so wise, but you were also a little one,
mhm.
you know, having to be
Yeah.
responsible. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it goes for maybe a lot of folks, it's pretty young. It
Mhm.
happens pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the importance of remembering back. And also, yeah, I think it is hard to identify codependency in a 2.5 year old.
Yeah, because
But
it's actually like, so our learning it's pre-verbal, like everything, we don't have language at that point, so we don't have the ability to like really understand or make memory connections, but our body remembers like that. It's like
mm,
in the implicit memory, so it's like in our cells, it's in our body that we know. And that's why it gets complex with like even attachment work, and working with like folks who are feeling really anxious in relationships. Like, it's not something we can put our finger on, but it's often a felt sense of something's wrong.
right.
And unless you're really listening or have, taken time to slow down and, yeah, go inward, it can be easily missed, that
Mm,
knowing or why we're doing something. It's
yeah.
very, yeah.
Mhm. All
Mhm.
right. Well, you started to share about your relationship with your mom. I'm
Mhm.
curious, Jacqueline, like either with her or someone else, like is there a codependent experience or relationship, maybe like a more specific memory from your
Mhm.
own life that you can share with us?
Yeah, for sure. One that comes to mind was when I was like in maybe I was in my 20s. Yeah, I think I was in my 20s or maybe 1920. I was in college and I remember I had my first boyfriend. I was like a late bloomer. I just didn't really date in high school. I was awkward and it was just it's a whole thing, just high school thing. But so I had my first boyfriend and I was just like so into him that and I feel like just the idea of like being in connection or like having love or having somebody like give me attention, I was almost like high off of it. Like I just like needed that love so much. But I reflecting back, I was like, I just totally like abandoned myself and like my duties. Like I remember just like skipping homework assignments in school to like go hang out with him or just like breaking plans just to go be with him, just like even though that wasn't really in alignment or in the best thing that I could have done for myself. um it was again this just like unconscious part of me that I was like, oh, I just really want to be with him. And I didn't even feel like I had a I don't it was like it was happening. I witnessed it happening, but I didn't feel like I had control over it. But that's what I noticed. And I actually ended up eventually dropping out of school after that because it just like ended up um really needing to take care of my mental health. And that was part of my own mental health journey. So I totally trust the process that I needed to go through that, but it was really hard. And then obviously, like once we broke up, that was devastating because I was like, he doesn't want to be with me. And I remember calling him like crying and being like, let's get back together. He just like needed more space. And um I remember almost like I think he said he didn't want to be exclusive. And there was a part of me that really wanted that exclusivity with him and just to feel safe and comfortable with him. But I like, again, I like almost like self-abandoned and it was like, it's fine. I can be with you, if we're not exclusive. Eventually, obviously, that didn't work out either. So, but yeah, so that's kind of how it showed up. It's like just, um, yeah, like losing myself in the relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
really good definition. Losing
Mhm.
my, or just, yeah, like reality of it, losing myself in the relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Well, you already started to talk about our bodies
Mhm.
and yeah, like memory being stored in the body. So let's shift to your specialty and focus.
Mhm.
Starting with in general, Jacqueline, how have you observed codependents relate to their bodies?
Yeah. It's such a good question. I think I really see it as like folks just again, it's like the abandoning self, but it comes as like not taking care of yourself. Does it mean maybe it means like skipping meals because you said yes to too many things that you didn't actually want to do but felt like you had to be loved or appreciated. Um I think there's also a piece. I work with a lot of women who struggle with like body image and maybe struggle with food things and food struggle. Um, and I think there's something about that too, of like, I think there can be like a lot of internalized messaging about how we're supposed to be. Like if somebody's thin enough or if somebody looks a certain way, then they'll be more beautiful and then they'll be more loved. So I think it also shows up like that of like, oh, I'm gonna like go on like intense diet so I appear a certain way so somebody will love me. Or yeah, not eat really what I want to eat. Or just and then also with that, like there can be a strong internalized critic that like when you're trying on clothes, thinking about going out to that date, that you're looking in the mirror and you're just like so critical of yourself of like, oh, I look so ugly. I just like nothing looks good on me. And it's that critic part which is trying to, all of our parts. I don't know if you probably talk about parts on here, but like the parts work in therapy and stuff. It's like we have all these parts that support us, even though they might be like assholes. Like, for example, our critic part that's saying like, you look bad in the mirror, or, you look terrible in this clothes. Like that part is like motivating you to do something. But so maybe, yeah, internalized critic, or that, the messages that we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, or we need to be doing more to be loved, whether that's conscious or unconscious, like that's how it shows up. Yeah. So I think that's it. And then another piece is like when we feel like we need to like please others in order to be loved, like maybe we need to go above and beyond, or like feel like we need to be perfect in the relationship, or like, just be the perfect girlfriend or partner. Um, we actually lose connection with our authentic self. We lose connection with our real voice. Like we can put on like a fake voice of like who we think our partner wants us to be, and then we lose our authentic connection. And yeah, that takes a toll. I know we kind of moved away from body, but yeah, there is a toll.
Well, I think, and yes, you're moving away from body, but also at the same time, lacking connection with your authentic self takes a toll physically as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I agree, like really I've again, I've talked about this in previous episodes, but maybe not been as explicit. Like I looking back, um yeah, one of my therapists, she's like, yeah, you probably had an eating disorder. And then I've had other therapists who were like eating disorder, disordered eating.
Mm,
And yeah, I think if like we go back to the root of the root and the bud of the bud,
yeah.
my codependency manifested in like multiple ways.
Mm,
But yeah, people's approval of my body was so paramount for me,
yeah.
right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be for every single codependent. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm like, eating disorder, disordered eating, or
Mm,
codependency manifesting through my relationship with my body, which is my relationship with my body, like through your approval and like
yeah.
really trying to meet like conventional standards of beauty.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like not even like that long ago, like even like working on this podcast, I've shared I'm pregnant
Mm,
and I had to gain weight for my fertility. Like my doctors were like, "How much do you weigh?"
yeah.
Oh, I run and I eat healthy and
Mm,
I'm fitting this conventional beauty standard of weight. And they were like, that's not a fertile weight. It's like, oh, oops. Um, yeah, and like just on some level, there was part of me who was like, I'm checking this box. Like I'm meeting the standard,
yeah.
which was in complete opposition to another, kind of standard or life
Mhm.
like experience I wanted to have, which was having a baby.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
mhm.
And like, I mean, you're just so not alone in that. Like it's so common, especially for like women and female identified folks. Um, there's just so much messaging about how we're supposed to be in the world, how our
Mhm.
bodies are supposed to be. Like, and it takes a toll. And
Mhm.
it's very much like little planted seeds about little things. Just from like a commercial we hear, just like an ad that is about, that we quickly scroll past. about a diet or eating a certain way or to lose weight and then whatever. And so yeah, it's real. And because it's like if we list, if we have those messages like most people do, like I think like 95% of women are dissatisfied with their bodies. Like that's a real stat in the state. So it's a lot. It's a lot. But it's like, yeah, so if codependency is kind of like abandoning yourself for others, then it's like if we are doing all the things, if we want to feel good enough for others, and the messaging is that if you're thin or if you look a certain way, then that makes you enough. And it makes total sense. It's like, of course, then it's going to impact women and with dieting and like how they work out and what they eat. So it's really very connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And then
And go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then it's just like with that, it's like we need to ignore oftentimes our body's like true wants or needs to like honor that. It's like we need to abandoning our body to to try to make it into something that it's not for another person.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, how does getting connected to our bodies help us have better relationships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our bodies are like so our bodies are so awesome. They're so full of wisdom and they're so full of messages. Like they tell us when something's wrong or we're sick, like our bodies give us so much information. Um,
Mhm.
and even like, so my background's also in like mindfulness-based therapy. And so I did a lot of training with like mindfulness and psychology. And so actually for every maybe thought and emotion we have, there's like an accompanying sensation that happens in our body, which is wild. Like
Mhm.
our emotions like are come through our systems as sensations in our body. And so say we're in like a relationship, one that's maybe like codependent, and we're like saying yes when we really want to say no. Like that means we're bypassing our body's messaging. Like our body oftentimes gives us, like if we're listening, like it definitely guides us. Like say for example, if I say to you right now, like I want you, and just like notice whatever happens, and people listening, like feel free to check this out. So just take a moment to a little experiential, like if I say like take a moment to find your breath in your seat or your feet. And when I say this prompt to you, like I want you to um donate $1,000 to um the neo-Nazi party. And just like noticing what comes up. Like for me, like I noticed my stomach tighten. And I was just like,
Mhm.
oh wow, like, and I'm curious if you had any felt sense that came through too of like I would try to choose like an extreme thing. I'm like, I mean, there might be folks who are like, okay, sure, but like actually probably a lot of people are gonna be like, no, no, I don't want to do
Yeah.
it,
I think just like a narrowing. Yeah. Not necessarily like a tightness in my chest, but I just kind of felt like getting narrow internally.
Yeah, like so like a little, yeah, but there was a sensation that was like,
Mhm.
ooh, I don't some, and getting curious about what that sensation is. But so when we get connected with our bodies, so like that's a lot of work that I do with my clients. It's like a lot of practicing of listening and honoring. It's like we actually get to listen to our truth and what we want. We get to know maybe what our body actually wants to eat. We get to know when something's aligned or not. It's through getting connected with our body and being embodied that we start to really get to know ourselves and not do what we feel like we should do, but actually do what our system wants us to do. And it's like we get to honor our truth by
Mm.
connecting to our bodies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So not doing what we think we should do, but honoring our system. Mhm.
I'm like trying to think of maybe an example or something with that of like, um, yeah, like I even think about, intimacy or having sex or like, like that's one that feels so vulnerable and we need to be so intimate. But I think it's something that can happen in codependent relationships where it's like maybe partner is pressuring or ask for, and we feel like we need to do it to make them happy or please
Right.
them. When in fact, like if we're listening to our body, like our body might be shut down, we might be disconnected, we might have a strong no, and that like if we're actually listening to that, it's just like, yeah, it's going to be a lot harder to say yes, and it's going to be just like, I mean, it just never feels good to not honor our bodies in that way.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember the first time I got a UTI, I was in a very codependent relationship. And just like anytime he wanted to, I was like, okay, ready. And what that turned into was we had sex way too often one weekend. And
Mhm.
then I didn't know about the pee after sex, but honestly, I think it just was way too frequent in general for my for
What?
vagina. And yeah, I did not want to have sex like as much as we did.
Mhm.
And yeah, I remember like I had like a burning sensation. I called my mom, who's a nurse. I was like, Mom, she's like, oh, probably have a UTI. And so this was after the fact, but still, my body was at least telling me on
Mhm.
Monday, like, no, that
Yeah.
was way too much.
Yeah.
Please do not repeat that ever again.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, these are the consequences. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, here I was doing what I thought I should, right?
Mhm.
Dishonoring my system. I did get that memo later on. Um, yeah, so, right, being connected with your body, um, yeah, it can help you have like better, more genuine relationships than, yeah, this like totally one-sided codependent one.
Totally. Yeah, because first of all, it's like what you named. It's like there could literally be health effects for not like honoring your body. But then also like if you're in a relationship where you're doing things that like deep down inside, like you really don't want to be doing, you're gonna build resentment towards that person. There's going to be a lot of expectations that maybe you put on this person, like I'm doing this for them, then they need to be doing this for me. Like it just is a total setup when we aren't really honoring our own needs in relationship.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm sure like I made that boyfriend like like I'm I'm on antibiotics for you.
Yeah.
Then I was like mad, and he was thus more indebted to me that week to be nice and comply with whatever I wanted. Yeah,
That it turned into this, like maybe, I don't know if it was like a guilt trip situation or this
right.
interesting like that he owed you something or yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
we just get like more and more dysfunctional and toxic.
Mhm.
We just continue to spiral down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Jacqueline,
Mhm.
how might someone be able to notice their boundaries through their
Like it is a practice of like learning to listen. Like we need to be able to slow down. Maybe that means like in work I do with my clients, it's like mindfulness practices. It's like doing practices with even like food or drinking water, and like learning like our cravings as well as learning things that we don't want. So maybe that means like we run through like, oh, how do you know you're thirsty? How do you know you're hungry? Like, how do you know when you actually want something or not? And so maybe it's like asking that question and slowing down and listening. And yeah, our no's are sometimes like, again, they come as sensations. They come as a tightening. They come as sometimes maybe a stomach ache. Like our boundaries show up as like discomfort, like something's just wrong, things not feeling right. And it is a practice of like honing in, um, and becoming more aware to the subtleties of our bodies that I think can help with that. Um, I'm going to see if there's an example that wants to come up. Um, yeah, I just think again, like the holiday season of like, having a friend reach out and say like, oh, will you bake, all these cookies or bring all these things to the party? And oftentimes if we have like a codependent part or like a people pleaser part, we're like, yeah, of course. But really, if I listen and I'm like, oh man, I'm freaking full and I got a lot of stuff going on and my husband's sick, and like when I listen in, and if there's a no, it's like, oh yeah, it's maybe a tightening, it's a, oh God, it's like the grin and bear it might come through. So it really is subtle. I think it's really unique to people. Like everybody's body is going to speak in a different way. It is a practice of just like connecting with your body, building, emotional intelligence and somatic awareness, to really just support you in knowing. Mhm.
I really appreciate that emphasis on everyone's body will speak to them in a unique way.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I have patients who, yeah, I'm like, what do you notice? Like as we're talking about that interaction. And yeah, they'll be like, oh, I'm so nauseous. I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, right, tell me about nauseous. But like, I never get nauseous, ever.
Mhm.
Right. So part of me might wonder, like, oh, I guess I don't have any issues because I never get nauseous.
Yeah.
But for me, I was talking about this with preparing for birth. Our prenatal doula asked about like what are some signs, Marissa, that you might be
Mhm.
stressed or nervous. And sometimes even during podcast interviews, it's under the Zoom view, but
Mhm.
I press my nails into my opposing hand a lot. Or sometimes I'll make fists, and
Mhm.
it's like I have been doing that, yeah, maybe pre-verbal. It's just one way I cope with some
Yeah,
tension. I make
totally.
fists, or like, yeah, kind of like poke the other hand with my nails.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm not getting nauseous, but yeah, maybe I'm in a situation. I think during podcast interviews is because I'm nervous. But
Mhm.
yeah, at other times, I might be uncomfortable. And so being attuned to that. And
Oh,
yeah, my hands like all like
here.
messed up. The prints are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something more unique to me and my body. And my patients who get nauseous might be like, what the fuck? Like, why are you pinching, basically? Why are you pressing your nails into your skin?
Yeah.
But like valuing the unique ways that all of our bodies speak to us. Yeah, I
Mhm.
really, really appreciate that.
Mm. Yeah, and thank
Mm-hmm.
you for sharing about this, like, yeah, that we all do have unique experiences and how we process stuff. And like you named like somebody getting nauseous, and I'm like, oh, it's like literally our bodies like, oh, I need to get that out. Like it's gross, it's disgust. It's like, get away from me. Um, and as you were speaking, I was like, oh yeah, like anger. Anger is really one of those interesting emotions that if we notice anger often means like, oh, there's a boundary violation happening. Somebody's not honoring my boundaries. Maybe there's been a disrespect of boundaries or requests or like that. So oftentimes anger will come up. And if we've never had a space to practice anger and like know that it's okay to express anger, sometimes what can happen is people will turn that back in on themselves. I think you know, yeah. So whatever that could look like, whether that's, maybe even self-injury or hurting themselves or being really mean to themselves. So there's a lot of ways that it can manifest, our boundaries will manifest. But it is like, and then even like, yeah, clenching the fists. So like somebody's talking to you and you find yourself like unconsciously clenching your fists, which is another thing. It's like a lot of these things, it's going to be unconscious until somebody, maybe highlights it to us or yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I used to shake my foot a lot and like I've like evolved from that because I'm so relaxed thanks to meditating. But or yeah, I don't put myself in situations where I'm like highly anxious, most of the time. But yeah, it is like an ever evolving like study of your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It really is. And our body like will tell us so much. And yeah, as a body-centered therapist, this is something that I work on with clients. I'm like, oh, we're talking about mom. What do you notice? Anything happening in your body? Like, oh, you're like, picking your nails. Okay, like let's go into that a little bit more. Or take a moment to get somatically curious. And there's so much wisdom and insight that can come from that.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Dramatically curious.
Yeah.
All right. Well, final question. What are the initial steps you take, Jacqueline, with codependents who want to change their relationship with themselves? Right? You talked about in your bio, beyond a mean, maybe abusive relationship to
Mm-hmm.
one that is kind, loving, and healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the initial steps, um, I think the initial step is usually awareness. So that means bringing in awareness practices, like having a space to get curious about patterns that are happening. And yeah, it just like means slowing down and really starting to look at stuff, conscious or unconscious. And because it's like when we become aware, yeah, like we've talked about from the beginning, it's like a lot of the stuff is unconscious. Our body is showing stuff that's unconscious. So when we take time to slow down and listen and become aware, it's no longer living in that unconscious realm. And we get to actually start to like explore it and process it, and like it's uncomfortable like when we become aware that we're doing something and it's like, oh, we are self-sabotaging or we're not honoring ourselves or we're being really mean to our bodies, like this like narrative that's been in the background playing on, you know low volume is now really loud. It's really uncomfortable, but like it's the first step of the process. It's like unless we bring it to conscious awareness, we can't really work with it. So a lot of the practices that I do are all about building awareness and then seeing whatever comes up and working with it from there. Whether that means doing some healing, do we need to do some grieving? Do we need to explore, what's it like to speak your truth? What's it like to, if part of your struggle is that you are not connected to your body or you're really mean to your body, what's it like to build a healthy relationship with your body? How could you, like, what does a healthy relationship with yourself look like? Could you write a love letter to yourself? Like, how would that go?
Yeah.
So I guess I went beyond the first step, but it is just like bringing in awareness and then exploring from there with whatever comes up. Yeah.
Writing a love letter. That sounds easier said than done.
100,000%. Like, yeah, especially if you haven't like been nice to your body, or haven't like appreciated your body, to like, what would it be like to actually apologize of like, oh, I'm so sorry that I said that to you, or that I did that to you. Like, yeah, it'd be a big process. Powerful and healing.
All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you do have a gift for our listeners related to your coaching program. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the program and then what you're offering?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm a licensed therapist in Colorado. So that means I can work therapeutically with folks in Colorado alone. But if I do have a coaching program, so that means I can work with folks anywhere. But it's 5 weeks to a better relationship with your body. So I support people in learning to identify their hunger cues or other cues, supporting them in building a healthy relationship with their body, building emotional intelligence, and working with them somatically. Also giving them tools for like if they're feeling stuck with something, or how to process that, even like using your body, and just like so much more, and really just meeting them with whatever they need as well. They may be coming with a specific issue, but yeah, so that's 5 one-on-one sessions, and we can meet in person or virtually. Yeah, and I'm offering that for 20% off for all the listeners. So
Thank
yeah.
you for that. So yeah,
Mhm.
I will put a link to that in the show notes. And then if people want to connect with you or learn more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, so my website is Jacqueline Rose Wellness. So maybe go into the show notes too to check that out. But Jacqueline, spelled like I don't know. How do I spell it out? JacquelineRoseWellness.com. So there's lots more info there. You can schedule a free consultation with me if you just want to have a chat and see, what it would be like to work together, whether that's in a therapy connection or as in this like body coaching connection.
Awesome. Okay, well, yes, I'll put a link to that as well. And yeah, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. My heart is so warm and happy. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, and dear listener, thank you for listening. And I will see you next week. Take care. Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.